Welcome back to another video, guys. Today I wore this t-shirt just to prove that Lumix cameras can do autofocus. In today's pro perspective, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the new Sony FX3. So let's just dive straight in.
Alpha.
This camera was actually leaked a few weeks back and people were saying it could be a new 8K beast, something along the lines of an A1 in a video cine body. People also said it could be something that might rival the Blackmagic Pocket Camera Cinema 6K, which they've just announced, which looks really exciting. There were some other things people were saying they hoped it would have, like ND filters built in. But now we have the full announcement and I've got the spec sheet here from Sony, and I must say I'm a little bit disappointed. Not because it doesn't look like a great camera, that would be possibly a step too far. But essentially this is a Sony A7S III in a more cine-friendly form factor, minus the viewfinder. So you've got the exact same specs internally as the A7S III, and that means your output, everything you're shooting is going to look exactly the same from the FX3 as it does from the A7S III. The only real differences here are physical. As you can see, the body is quite a radical departure from what we've seen from the previous, well, from the A7 series cameras. They've got multiple threads all over it, so it's designed so you don't need to put a cage over the body, which is going to be really cool for people that want to accessorize and like to use their cameras in that way without having to go out and buy an extra cage. It also comes with an XLR, a detachable XLR mic input, which is actually the same. It looks like it's the exact same audio module that you can get for the Sony A7 series cameras, the XLR K3M audio module. It looks like the exact same module, but on a handle, which is cool. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's nothing new per se. Just to kick off, I'm gonna run through Sony's product highlights from this camera, just to show you just how similar this is to the A7S III. So it has a 10.2 megapixel, what they're calling a 10.2 megapixel back illuminated CMOS Exmor-R sensor with the Bionz XR image processor, exactly the same as the Sony A7S III. It says 10.2 megapixel because they're taking that as the 4K readout. But you can actually, when you take stills on this camera, which you can do, you'll get the same 12.1 megapixels, I think it is, image that you'll get from the A7S III. It's exactly the same. The same ultra high sensitivity ISO expandable up to 409,600. Which is going to be great for low light. It also has the same quoted 15 stops of dynamic range. One thing that it does have that the Sony A7S III doesn't currently have, but I suspect it will get soon, is S-Cinetone, which is a color profile from Sony's cinema range cameras like the FS6 and the FX9, which I expect they're probably going to put that on the A7S III because it's something that people who bought the A7S III said they wanted. And considering this is the same camera, essentially, if it can be on this camera, I don't see any reason why they won't release that at some point through an update, I imagine. It does record 4K up to 120 frames per second, just like the A7S III. It's a compact and lightweight body, which is designed specifically for handheld shooting, I'd say, but it also is a really good size and weight for gimbal mounting or even for mounting on drones. And we know from Sony's CES announcement that their whole aerial rig that they've created looks like it was kind of made with this camera in mind. I definitely think that Sony are looking to get more into the drone space and want cameras that are going to fit that type of production. So it looks like this could be the perfect camera for that. Also, it promises uninterrupted 4K shooting, and even though it doesn't seem like there's any recording limit issues with the A7S III when it comes to 4K 60 frames per second, they've also put a fan in this. I think when you're buying a cinema camera, you want ultimate reliability. So even though there aren't issues with the A7S III, the fact that they put a fan in this just to give you a little bit of help if you're in a particularly warm environment, this camera will be able to, well, should be able to handle running 4K video for, however long you need it. And you can turn that fan down and you can turn it off completely. So if you don't need it, it won't be there taking up battery and, potentially making any extra noise, which is great. And yeah, it has the same fast hybrid autofocus that we've got from the A7S III, which is amazing. Great face tracking and great subject detection. It's super quick. I kind of think Sony set quite a standard for what people have come to expect for autofocus in video. And this is going to be, no different in that respect either. One cool thing that it does have that people were complaining the A1 doesn't is it has a flippy out screen. So people who want to see themselves while they're shooting, they'll be able to do that. It's a 1.44 million dot 3-inch screen. Again, nothing new there. You can flip it out and you can flip it forwards so you can see yourself while you're recording, which will be super helpful for some people. And like I said, it doesn't have an electronic viewfinder at all. That isn't going to be a thing. I don't even think it has one that you can attach to it. At least they haven't announced it if there is. That multi-interface hot shoe is designed to slip the handle in and then you screw it in either side of it so you can hold the camera while you're recording, and it has XLR inputs and the 3.5mm audio input as well, so you can go straight into that. It's a great accessory to have, and I think it's going to be super popular, and I like the fact that it's not an extra. It comes in the box with the camera, so that's really cool. An interesting physical change that I've seen from the pictures, but obviously haven't had a chance to try out, is they've removed the power button that, I don't have a Sony to hand, but on the Sony A7 bodies, the power button is on just in front of the shutter button. They still have that, but it's actually a zoom control. So you can power zoom with that instead of turning the camera on and off, and they've moved the power switch over to the left shoulder on the back of the camera. And I think that makes it feel a little bit more like the FX3 in terms of styling and control. If you're familiar with that, this will feel a bit more familiar to you. They put a nice big record button on the top, which shines bright red when it's recording. It also has 2 tally lights, which I like a lot. So when you're recording, those shine nice and bright, so you actually know that the camera's turning over. That's a really cool feature to have, and it's something that I would have liked to have seen from some of the other cameras that are more video focused that have been released recently. So it's great that they've included that too. Now, I don't want to complain about this camera because, like I said, it's based on the A7S III, which is, as many people by now will know, is an amazing camera. And this is essentially the A7S III in another form. But calling it a cinema camera, I would have expected to see DCI 4K in the body. I don't understand why they wouldn't include that. It will output 16-bit raw 4K to an external recorder via full-size HDMI, which it does have. That's great. But also it doesn't have a true cinema shutter angle. So there's no 1/48, no true 24p shutter angle in this camera, which is, again, a strange thing to leave out. There's no ND filters. For me, that would have been a really big win. If they'd have put that in there, this camera would have been a huge, huge announcement for me. And looking at the small print, you know, on the announcement, the asterisks that they put on there, it looks like the handle with the audio module could compromise this camera's weather sealing, which is a bit of a concern for me. They say it's not guaranteed to be 100% dust and moisture proof. The XLR handle does not feature a dust and moisture resistant design, that's just bizarre. The handle's been made specifically for this camera. This camera has been made specifically for people who want to run and gun and be out with, you know, shooting stuff on the go. They've designed the handle for this camera, so why have they said in the small print, the XLR handle does not feature a dust and moisture resistant design? They could have done that, and for me that seems, again, like a miss. I don't get it. So yeah, it looks like a great camera, but there's things missing that it should have, and I don't understand why. And also, if they were going to release this camera, this would have been designed and created and planned a long time ago. Why not just ditch the A7S III? Because we waited a long time for that anyway. Why not ditch the A7S III, give us this, call it the FX3. It could be the evolution. It's clearly an evolution of the A7S III. People buying the A7S III aren't buying that to shoot stills. Most people aren't buying that to shoot stills. They don't necessarily need an EVF. And if they want a true hybrid camera, Sony has the A7 III. They now have the A1. They have the A7R4. They have the A9. Those are great hybrid cameras. Sony didn't need to make the A7S III, release that a few months ago, get people to go and buy that, and then release this. I really find that strategy questionable. And I think some people who own the A7S III, who are very video-centric and don't use it at all for stills, they will have bought that camera. And I think they're going to be looking at this announcement and be quite frustrated that they've spent, you know, £3,000+ on, or dollars or euros, wherever you are, on a camera that essentially has been given the video-centric makeover that they really wish their camera had. And they've gone out and already bought that audio module for extra money, and they've put a cage on it, and they spent possibly £1,000+ making the A7S III more video focused, when they could have waited a few months and bought this, which is, you know, $400 more, but comes with the audio module and doesn't need a cage at all. and essentially is the same camera inside. So you're getting the same great image quality, the same autofocus, the same dynamic range, the same skin tones. Oh, also you get S-Cinetone in the body at launch, straight out of the box. It just seems like a slap in the face to people who are more video centric and bought the A7S III in good faith, thinking that was the camera for them. Whereas Sony knew the FX3 was coming, and that's actually the camera for those customers. It's a weird strategy to me. If you haven't bought the A7S III yet, or you haven't bought a Cine camera and you were thinking, should the A7S III be my new camera? I guess you need to just ask yourself, if video is your main pursuit, that extra 400 that you're gonna spend, this camera is obviously the one for you, because you're not gonna buy a cage. You'll save on, getting decent audio out of your A7S III as well. There's absolutely no reason to buy an A7S III now. I don't think anybody has any reason to buy the A7S III now that this camera exists. So yeah, I would just buy the FX3. And if you have an A7S III now, I'd sell it as soon as possible and get this camera, because this is probably a much better camera for the type of work or the type of things that you like to shoot. So just to wrap up, the Sony FX3 will be shipping from March for £4,200 in the UK and for 4,700 euros in Europe. I think it's around the same price in dollars as well if you live somewhere where they spend dollars. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the FX3. That's my pro perspective. I think the FX3 is a great camera, but the A7S III was a mistake and they shouldn't have done it. They should have just canned that whole line, just brought out this camera and said, this is your answer to the people who wanted and waited for years for the A7S III. But that's just the cynic in me talking. Whether you disagree or agree with me, let me know in the comments section below. And if you have Instagram or Twitter, I'm Gadgets John on Instagram and John Devo, Jondevo on Twitter. Thanks for watching. I guess I'll catch you guys in the next video.